From trailer to theater, we waited 3 years to see this movie. Was it worth the wait? On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss The New Mutants. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramie Wells, and joining me today is horror movie connoisseur and host of the Interview with a Horror Virgin podcast. Please welcome James Brooks. How are you, James?
Hey, Laramie, how you doing? I'm doing well tonight.
I'm excited about this one. So we'll go ahead and talk about James's new podcast, Interview with a Horror Virgin. Go ahead, James, and explain for everybody what this podcast is.
Okay, thanks a lot, Laramie. So, Interview with the Horror Virgin is an interview, as it says in the title, and I find people who haven't seen certain horror films, get them to watch it, and we do a before and after interview. I ask them some questions before they watch the horror film, just to be like, what do you expect from this horror film? What do you think it's about just from the title? They'll give me their honest answers. They'll go and watch it, then we come back, and we'll do some after questions. They'll give me their reactions, how they felt, did they find it as scary as they did before, and it's really neat because they give me some really nice raw questions because their expectations change every time.
Yeah, a very genius concept for a podcast, and very interesting to listen to, just the way that people kind of explain like why they haven't watched the particular movie. Because you've done some classics, like you did the original Amityville Horror.
Yep.
And the fact that you found someone who had never seen the Amityville Horror, it's interesting, to find out, why have you never seen this horror movie? And then, of course, finally getting them to watch it and perception. And there's nothing better than the first watch of a movie.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm waiting to find one person who has not seen Friday the 13th. I'm on the look for them because those are the best ones when they haven't seen the really good classics, the Freddys, the Jasons.
Oh, yeah. Nope. I'm a child of the 80s. I've seen them all multiple times. So it's not me. I might could find somebody. Let me see if I can help you out with that one. But what we're going to do today on Moving Panels is we're going to kind of borrow this idea. So James and I talked about what we wanted to do, and we decided we want to do The New Mutants, which of course fits into James's wheelhouse because it is a superhero movie that was very much portrayed as a horror film. Very different approach to the X-Men movies. And the thing was, coincidentally, I have never seen it. I have never seen the New Mutants movie. So we are recording this right now without me have seen, whatever the term is there. I still have not seen New Mutants. So we're going to do a little bit of recording here. James might even ask me some questions because he has seen the movie.
Yes.
He is familiar with the movie. And I'm going to go ahead and say there's not any reason I haven't seen the movie other than I've heard that the movie's not 100% great, and so it's kind of been on the bottom of my list. But I have purchased it, as I do all superhero movies, and I have had an interest in watching it, so we will watch it. But before we get into that, we'll go ahead and do the first part of our show. We'll get into background information and kind of talk about production, because this movie's got a very interesting story when it comes to its release. So the movie, speaking of Friday the 13th, the movie had its first trailer air on Friday the 13th back in 2017.
Wow.
I actually remember seeing that trailer.
I don't remember it.
Do you remember? You don't remember seeing the original trailer? I do. I remember seeing the original trailer and I was like, oh, they're doing New Mutants, and it looks, they made the trailer. It looked like a horror movie. And it was set to be released on Friday the 13th of April 13th, 2018. So it was like perfect storm there, You release the trailer on a Friday the 13th. You're going to release the movie. It was probably the very next Friday the 13th, which was going to be April of the next year. So April 13th, 2018, Friday the 13th, this interesting new idea of a superhero movie as a horror movie. Looks awesome. And then they delayed the movie. almost an entire year. They moved it to February 22nd, 2019. Now, do you know why they delayed the movie?
I didn't really know why they delayed it. I thought it was maybe production issues. Maybe someone from higher up was putting their hands in and causing too much trouble.
Well, yeah, there's some of that, but apparently the reason for this first delay was they didn't want it to conflict with the release of Deadpool 2.
Really?
Yeah. I guess they figured, hey, we already had success from Deadpool. We got Deadpool 2 coming out. We want to release that at this time. And so let's just push back this New Mutants movie.
Okay, that makes sense. More of like a marketing technique or tool that you're trying to do.
So, but let me be clear. They have already released the trailer. There's already a trailer. There's a trailer. There's TV spots already. And they've now, in 2017. And now the movie's not coming out till 2019. All right. Well, did the movie come out in February of 2019? No, it did not. It got delayed again to August 2nd of 2019. So a few months later. Do you know what they chalked this delay up to?
Oh, I need to hear it.
They didn't want it to conflict with the Dark Phoenix movie.
Yes, because the last thing you want to do is, conflict that wonderful film.
Nope, we can't have two X-Men related movies come out together. And we know the X-Men movies will probably do better than this New Mutant. People aren't familiar with these New Mutant characters, so we'll release Dark Phoenix. We haven't covered Dark Phoenix yet on this show, but wow, that didn't work out real well. Then it got delayed again. Got delayed and moved to April 3rd of 2020. Now, do you know why this delay happened?
Well, comedy works in threes. Lay it on me.
Disney bought Fox. That's it.
I love it.
That is why it got delayed this time. Disney bought Fox, and when Disney acquired Fox, every movie that was on Fox's schedule got removed so that Disney could sort it all out and let it fit their schedule. So that now Fox movies and Disney movie, you didn't have a big Fox movie competing with a big Disney movie or anything like that. So that's what happened to that. Now, of course, we're talking, they now are saying the release date is April 3rd, 2020, and you definitely know what happened in March of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had the beginning of our wonderful pandemic.
Yep, everything got delayed with that, so it would hurt everybody.
Everything down. Yeah, shut everything down. So the April 2020 release wasn't going to happen. Then it was announced that it was being shelved. And so there was question as to whether or not the movie was even going to be released. Then there was, of course, talk. I found this. I didn't get real deep into it, but I found out that after Disney acquired Fox, there was some announcement or whatnot where they talked about upcoming movies for Marvel, and they listed New Mutants. But because they're listing all these other Marvel movies, you got to remember every other Marvel movie they listed would be MCU. New Mutants is not MCU. But by putting New Mutants on a list with all these other movies, people were thinking, okay, this is going to be a part of the MCU now. But then after that was brought up, it was immediately removed from the list of upcoming movies. Yeah, a lot of confusion in this movie. And there was talk that Disney Plus was pretty new at the time, and there was talk that, okay, we're going to just release it on Disney Plus or Hulu or something. But no, they finally released it August 28th of 2020. So 3 years. 3 years from trailer to theater. Can you believe that?
For a Marvel film like this, I really can't believe it, especially if it's X-Men. Usually X-Men films don't really take this long. I know with the whole situation with like Fox and Disney, those films kind of got lost into the mix of everything, along with Dark Phoenix, I feel. So I can kind of understand, but at the same time, it's sad to see this happen to like some X-Men films that they were trying to bring forth like in 2017.
But let's get into kind of the idea behind this movie. Now, again, I'm talking about all of this I haven't seen the movie. So I'm talking about all of this just based off of what I found about production. So the movie's directed by Josh Boone, who also co-wrote the screenplay. And he began work on this back in 2014. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, James. Are you aware that his plan was to make a trilogy?
I did not know that was going to be a trilogy. That's new on me.
Yeah. Again, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know if it has a beginning of a trilogy feel, but his plan was for the first movie to be a supernatural horror movie. Again, I don't know how well he succeeds, but then the second movie was going to be an alien invasion style horror movie. And I guess when you say alien invasion, like, help me out here, James, but when you say alien invasion horror movie, are we talking about like Invasion of the Body Snatchers? Like, is that what you think of?
That's really what comes to mind, like that or like War of the Worlds type. Those are like the two that I can think of when you say alien invasion with X-Men.
Yeah, but also to say horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
To say, I mean, I guess you could say Alien. I mean, Alien is it's not really an alien invasion, but
it's kind of a slasher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that still follows under the realm of horror movie. And then the third movie in the trilogy was supposed to be an apocalyptic horror movie.
All right. So we talking like Mad Max level apocalyptic?
From what I discovered is that he was basing this off of the Inferno storyline from 1989, which focuses on one of the New Mutants, on Illyana.
Okay.
It focuses on her and her becoming this. It's almost a Dark Phoenix story. Her becoming this creature called the Dark Child, and then there's other things with other characters, but. Again, I can see where this is building up to. It's pretty much saying, all right, we're now gonna throw one of the characters where there's this inner turmoil between, all these others. There's New York has been in ruins. He probably would have built that off of the alien invasion.
Oh, I like that actually.
Inferno is actually a demonic invasion, which is decimated New York and other places. But I'm wondering if he would have taken the aftermath of the alien invasion and then went into this Inferno storyline. The whole connection with Illyana and Limbo and all of that, and kind of tying it all together. I think that would have been his idea. That's really all I know about the trilogy. So what are your thoughts on this possibly, since you have seen the movie, without spoiler free, do you think this movie could have been a setup for a trilogy?
Now that you've mentioned the Alien story and the Inferno one, specifically the Inferno one, I can see the trilogy happening after seeing it. Because you mentioned the whole like Dark Phoenix story, what they were going for with it. It works for it, because there were some parts of it I didn't understand, because I actually have not read the 3-part story like Laramie has, so he's going to be watching it while I read it to kind of fill in what I may have missed. But I really like the Inferno story because I love the hell arcs in the Marvel stories. They're very well thought out. Mm-hmm. They almost remind me of the whole like old Catholic stories and everything that they tie in. Like we have Mephisto when he comes into the Marvel Universe, and I just love it when it comes into the X-Men. Their whole characters have their dark sides, especially with the New Mutants, because they're young, they don't know their powers as well, and we kind of see that growth happen. And with this trilogy, it works. If there was going to be a trilogy, it would have helped a lot more.
Yeah, a part of me wonders how they would have taken this, because the idea behind the Inferno storyline is that demons from Limbo have entered our world and they are taking over. And the Inferno storyline was a Marvel crossover event. So the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, on top of the X-Men, they're all involved. And they all, I don't know if every single one of them, but a good chunk of them are demon possessed. And so it ultimately becomes, I guess you would say in the movie, it would be the New Mutants versus, the older guard. Now, how they do that in the movie, with this originally being Fox, and so they only had access to X-Men characters, I don't know if their intention was to bring in X-Men for the trilogy, and then it be the New Mutants versus the X-Men for that kind of final movie. But I don't know. It's kind of interesting finding that out. What was the plan for a New Mutants trilogy? Which makes sense because they did trilogies for pretty much all the rest of the. I mean, they had a trilogy for the original X-Men. They had a trilogy for Wolverine. Technically, they had 4 movies for the First Class group, but so I don't know. Would have been interesting. But with that being said, I did find out that James McAvoy was supposed to appear in this movie.
Really?
As Professor X. Yeah. Like, he was set to appear. Storm was supposed to appear as well. So there was going to be a connection to the X-Men, but that all got scrapped with rewrites and all. But in August of 2016, director Josh Boone revealed that they would be doing the Demon Bear. And so a lot of comic book fans kind of went, oh, well, that just makes sense. That's probably the most famous New Mutant story is the Demon Bear. So, hey, it works later. Of course, then a year later, Boone said, well, we're doing the Demon Bear, but the Demon Bear is not the main villain. And I think that put a pause. That was like the first kind of tap your brakes for comic book fans, because they're like, well, wait, why not? Like, Demon Bear is good enough to be the full-fledged villain. Why? So who was the villain? Now, again, haven't seen the movie. I don't know who they end up making the villain. I don't know if the trailer doesn't really reveal who the villain is. So I'm very curious about that. But let me get your opinion here on this as well, James. Is the Demon Bear kind of put to the side, or is the Demon Bear still a predominant part of this movie?
The Demon Bear is a predominant, but it's on the back burner for a bit. Like, it's hinted at the very beginning, like the opening titles makes a reference to a Native American bear, not giving away too much. So they're kind of like throwing in a little bit at a time at you throughout the film, and you're waiting for it.
It's kind of, this is very interesting since, we're doing the show this way, is I'm saying no spoilers, and we're talking about the Demon Bear, and I do know the Demon Bear story in the comic books. And so how much can you say that's a spoiler that wouldn't technically be a spoiler because I already know how the Demon Bear story plays out in the comics? Did that make any sense, what I just said?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to give away, like, at this point in the movie, this is where the Demon Bear comes out. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. But here's the thing. We talked about all of these different moving of the release date. And then there were supposed to be some reshoots that happened along this line. And we'll get into why in a moment. But before we get into that, I just want to go ahead and tell you this so you know this going in. In March of 2020, once they decided that they were going to, halt the release of the movie because of COVID, Josh Boone actually said in an interview, you know what? They keep pushing this movie back. And I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not saying exactly what he said. But he in essence said, and people keep talking about all these reshoots we're having to do. None of them ever happened. So that means that the movie that they settled on back in, 2016, 2017, whenever they actually wrapped, is the movie we got in 2020. So there was no changes to anything, because there was talk about, because of the failure of Dark Phoenix, they went in and changed some stuff. Because of the Disney acquisition, they had to go in and change some stuff. And then we're about to get into the horror aspect of the movie, and them going in and changing some stuff to make the studio happy. But according to Boone, none of that actually happened.
So, amongst everything that happened between then and now, nothing else was ever, tweaked.
According to what I read that Josh Boone said, Nothing else was tweaked.
Nobody
Now,
from upstairs, nobody came in, nobody said anything. They just kind of waited around? Really?
well, so what I gather is that they did re-edit the movie,
Okay.
but they never did any reshoots. So let's get into that. So let's talk about the whole idea of the movie. So the idea of the movie was a horror film. Boone wanted to make a horror film, and he has stated some of his favorite horror films are The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, The Shining. I mean, classics. But those are also a certain type of horror movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can see a little bit of The Exorcist inspirations in the New Mutants. Just a bit tad, because I've seen The Exorcist backwards and forward, so I can kind of see now why he mentions that's like one of his favorites along with others.
Yeah. His idea was he wanted to make a film that he called, and this is a quote, a prestige version of horror films.
Okay.
So sounds like he was aiming for a movie that would fit in the pantheon of movies like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, The Shining. But the problem was Fox was totally against that. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. I mean, look at all the stuff that Ryan Reynolds had to get through to get his R rating. So the fact that he wanted to do a New Mutants with a horror aspect from Fox, it would have been interesting to see it because he threw some horror aspects in the film that I can see what he was trying to do, but I can tell that part of it was having to edit and get it down to the PG-13 rating that it is today.
So that was kind of where this came from. So Fox was totally against it. What Fox wanted was a young adult drama.
I can say that's what it turned out to be for the New Mutants. Again, not spoiling too much, but it is a drama.
Yeah, they wanted a young adult drama. They were against the blood and the scares. And what they did was they hired this. I read this. I read this and just I couldn't believe it. They hired a 6-person quote unquote writer's room to, again, quote, tear apart the script and put it back together.
That is incredible. A 6-person writing room to do that? Are you for real?
Yeah. No, that's what I found in my research. So they took Josh Boone's story and they said, all right, we got this horror film. We want to not make it as much of a horror. We want to make it more of a young adult drama. So break it apart, break it down. Let's make it less horror, more drama. And again, we're talking about writers that are just, studio writers, just stock writers that Fox has, on a contract, and
it's such a Fox thing to do.
Yeah, they do the bidding of Fox.
Shame.
So, I mean, honestly, this has been a running theme with X-Men movies. You mentioned Deadpool, which still technically falls under this idea, and I mean that the Deadpool storyline goes all the way back to X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we know how that turned out, not only for Deadpool, but just that movie in general. And then, of course, there's Tim and I have done X-Men The Last Stand recently on the show, and we talk also about the conflicts that Fox and the filmmakers had and all that. So X-Men Origins, The Last Stand, now New Mutants. I mean, this, and I'm sure some other ones too. It's just we've done those pretty recently with the show. A lot of issues going up that ultimately the director of the movie, in I think all 3 cases that I'm talking about. So you got X-Men The Last Stand, X-Men Origins Wolverine, and then now New Mutants. All 3 of those, I think the director has said in some way, shape, or form that the movie that was released is not the movie that they intended to make.
Yep, that's what I've heard as well, because they wanted to do one thing, but then again, Fox being Fox goes in, puts their hands in, tears it apart, and puts the script back together to give them something else.
Yeah. Which is so surprising to me, because you've got like Avi Arad, who's an executive producer
Mm-hmm.
who has been attached to all of these. Richard Donner came in as an executive producer on the X-Men movies. I don't think he was on the first one. I'm not 100% on that, but I know he came in for some of the later ones as an executive producer. And I mean, you're talking about the guy who made Superman the movie. Like, he knows how to make a successful superhero movie. And so you would think that Avi Arad, who had his success with the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, and then, X-Men movies to kick off before things took a turn, you would think between them, they would be able to fix something. I mean, that's the whole point of Kevin Feige with Marvel and the MCU. Like, he makes sure that there's cohesiveness, that every movie feels like it's from the same universe. And that's just what Fox was missing. Fox just did not know how to make a cohesive universe with these X-Men.
Consistency is the key.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but eventually the story is that Fox changed their mind about the horror aspects. And it was actually because of the success of the It remake, Stephen King's It.
Mm-hmm.
After the success of that, Fox went, oh, you know what? Maybe people do like to see young people involved with horror. And so they changed their mind. They edited the trailers so that it focused more on the scary elements, because they had already been releasing trailers that was focusing more on it being a superhero film and the superhero aspect. And so they edited again to make it look more like a scary element. And then, like I said earlier, they planned for reshoots to make the film more like a horror, but according to the director, those reshoots never happened. So I am very curious to see what the final product is after doing that research about the anticipation I had from 2017. I mean, I still remember when I originally saw the trailer and the shot of, I don't know who it is, but whoever's inside of like the dryer and the hand that's on fire coming up and pressing up against the dryer. I mean, I was excited. They pull off you talked about the old slasher films. They pulled off the not Friday 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, when Freddy comes out of the wall.
Oh yeah.
They pulled that off. And so I was very excited about this. And again, the only reason I haven't watched it is because I heard it's going to disappoint me. But I'm still interested. I'm excited to do this. And we are going to break now. Of course, it'll seem like nothing to you as you're listening to this. And James is going to read the 3 issues from the 1980s that are on the Demon Bear saga. And I am going to watch New Mutants. So we'll be back. All right. So I have just watched the New Mutants. And James has read the 3 issues that made up the Demon Bear saga. And now we're going to discuss. So I'm going to let you take a little bit of this away. Again, we're mimicking your podcast. And so I'm going to let you, since I have now watched the movie, I'm going to let you ask me a few questions. Let's kind of take this over and make this a mini version of the Interview with a Horror Virgin podcast.
Oh, I'll do that for you.
If you call this a horror movie.
Oh boy, horror movie. Not so much. Maybe a bit of a thriller, but let's start off with the big one. Did your whole expectations change from reading it to watching it?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, you can play off of this because you just read it. I was actually more interested in the movie than I was in the comic.
Oh, absolutely.
The story in the comic is just, it's such a slow burn. There's so much exposition, and there's a lot of exposition in this movie, but I'm a little bit more interested. I don't know if it's just the visual media, being able to see it as a movie versus the still images, static images in the comic. But I gotta say, and I know you'll probably ask me about this. So I'm gonna go ahead and say this too. I think going in expecting it not to be good, I wasn't disappointed. Like, I actually thought it was better than my anticipation of it was.
Yeah, that's kind of how I went into it as well, because I remember you mentioning it to me. I was like, okay, I see the reviews. They're not that good. So I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I wasn't disappointed, but at the same time, I wasn't. My opinion really hadn't changed.
Well, what were your thoughts after reading the comic?
It was so underwhelming for
Yeah.
what I saw from the movie. I was like, this is very, very just slow. The characters aren't really doing much. It's kind of strange to see the focus on Ileana more than anything else throughout like the first, I think like 2 parts of the story in the comics, and then you get to Danny.
Well, and then they take Danny out like in issue 2.
Oh yeah.
And she's out for the whole rest of the story. Versus in the movie, and I know we'll get into this with more of the moving panel section, but versus in the movie where she doesn't get taken out, quote unquote, until, and it's only for a few minutes at the end of the movie.
Oh yeah, it is. It's interesting how they differ so much, because it feels like they're doing a training mission, and everybody's already kind of grown up, so I really call them like young. Whereas if you watch the movie, it really feels like you're watching the New Mutants. It's kind of strange seeing them in the story that it was written in versus watching the film. But from the next one, now, we were talking about the horror aspect of it. Do you really think it had that many horror aspects or horror scenes to it?
So I actually put this in my notes, and I might mention it again a little later. I got a Nightmare on Elm Street vibe off of it with the whole her manifesting their nightmares, their fears, and making them come to life. Got a very Nightmare on Elm Street vibe off of it. So I think it did have that horror element. It just, like you said, it doesn't feel like a horror movie.
No, it has some horror moments. I mean, I remember the smiling men still probably being the highlight for me. It kind of reminded me of, like, ironically, what they were watching with Buffy in the background.
I took that note. I actually have that in my notes. Yeah, the gentleman. Yeah, they're watching Buffy. They watch 2 episodes of Buffy. Now, I don't know if I've ever shared this. I am a huge Buffy fan. So I immediately recognized both of those episodes as soon as I saw them. The first one, which we see real close up, I mean, they give it its own shot, was when Willow and Tara first kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's tied into this movie because you got Danny and I just want to say Maisie because of the kid Rain. Danny and Rain, having their relationship and them kissing. And then the second episode you see it from a distance, but I looked and I was oh, that's Hush. And it's of course the smiling gentleman who they have they're the elongated kind of figures, just like the smiley face guys were. But at the same time, hey folks, if you've never watched Buffy, those are probably the 2 best episodes to watch of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Absolutely.
It's the body from season 4, and Hush, which I think is the greatest Buffy episode, Hush from season 5. If you've never gotten into Buffy, I say watch Hush. I mean, you could just watch Hush by itself. You don't even need any background or anything to watch that episode. Great episode, and I loved the connection, which makes sense that it's almost as if Marvel or Fox or whoever was giving back to Buffy because the whole Dark Willow storyline from Buffy has been said to be inspired from the Dark Phoenix storyline.
Really?
Yeah, Joss Whedon, which he's a comic book guy and he's got his connections to X-Men.
Right, yeah.
He wrote the famous Astonishing X-Men comics, which inspired X-Men: The Last Stand. He has said that he was inspired by the Dark Phoenix saga, and that was where he got the idea for the Dark Willow story arc that happens in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So yeah, absolutely loved the Buffy tie-in.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of an on-the-nose thing of what we were going to expect when the Smiling Men came, or just the whole nightmare of the fears and all that stuff. Which leads me to my next question for you. Do you think that it could have been better with more horror like it originally was going to do.
Yes. I think they needed a few other patients, no-name patients, or patients that we maybe are quickly introduced to. They needed some people to be killed. I honestly think.
Mm-hmm.
I think having Danny's, power manifest a fear or whatnot, and it actually caused some deaths. Maybe even have an orderly who's working for Dr. Reyes, have an orderly be killed by something. I think that could have helped give it more of a horror film, a horror feel. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, it definitely would have upped the stakes, in my opinion, because all we're doing is just showing all the scary stuff, and there's no consequences, no other than like maybe the pool scene.
Yeah, now I will say the pool scene is when I really locked in on this is a Nightmare on Elm Street aspect, especially with it being a flirtatious, having Ileana kind of flirting with Roberto. I got the Nightmare on Elm Street feel out of it, but let's go ahead and get into the characters. Let's talk about the characters, which I honestly think is going to be the bulk of our conversation
Absolutely.
here. I got a few things where we'll hit more about the comics, but let's get into the characters. Now, most of these characters, the New Mutants themselves, they are the original New Mutant characters, and so they were pretty much all introduced in the same comic, which is actually Marvel graphic novel number 4, which was then titled The New Mutants. And that happened in September of 1982. Only one of the characters, or one of the New Mutants, I should say, was not. We'll get into that in a minute. But let's start off with who is pretty much the main focus of the storyline, and that's Danny Moonstar. There's a couple of lines that imply what their superhero name is, but they're never called by their superhero names. Danny Moonstar in the comics is known as Mirage. Makes sense. She is able to make, things appear, their fears and hopes. She actually does good too with her powers. She can make her hopes, make someone's hopes come real too. But played by Blue Hunt. And I did find it interesting. I looked this up as I was watching the movie. Blue Hunt. This is actually the first American major studio film to feature a Native American in the lead role.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I think she does a great job. This also appears like she's very new to acting and has not been in an awful lot prior to this. She was on the television show The Originals. That seemed to be kind of her biggest part before this, but technically it was in the same year because she was in it in 2017, and remember that was when this movie was originally supposed to be released. So before that, she appeared in like an episode or two of a couple of things. So this was kind of her breakout role, and I thought she did a really good job.
I think she did too. I mean, she could have used some redirect and other stuff, but for breaking out into a really good role for this main story and everything, I thought she did a really, really good job. I liked her character.
How believable do you think it was that she was experiencing because I kind of didn't feel like she really portrayed the loss of her family that well.
Yeah, that really was, I want to say rushed or like brushed over just all of a sudden. Oh, they died in a tornado accident. Oh, they died in a tornado accident. And then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, when she wakes up handcuffed to the bed at the beginning, and then when Dr. Reyes tells her that, I would expected more out of her reaction, I think is where I'm more getting this from. Mm-hmm. Expect a little bit more out of that. And even her wanting to commit suicide right there at the beginning, that kind of just came and went. Like, why did she just all of a sudden have this thought to let me climb this tower and try to jump? I also kind of question how she thought once she got up there, how her brain went, yeah, it should be easy to kick the the wall of this clock out. Like, I wouldn't think it would be that easy. So, part of me would be like, how would I get out there? But yeah, then they have Rain stop her, and okay, we're good.
I don't know.
I think that was brushed over.
I think it
but
was...
I'm not blaming her. I'm blaming the writing.
That too. Plus, I think it was the whole thing we talked about beforehand. The teen drama had to have a little bit of angst in there at the very beginning.
Yeah. We'll talk about Tim with the 80s flick flashback, talking about the Breakfast Club. I've had conversations with Tim about the Breakfast Club that I am not a fan of the Breakfast Club. I don't know why people think so much and so highly of the Breakfast Club. And it's for this same reason. We've got all these characters that have all of these traumatic stories and elements to them that we don't get to flesh out because we're in an hour and a half movie.
Yeah, I mean, I did like Breakfast Club when I first saw it in high school, but now as I've gotten older, the appeal's kind of gone for me.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. We've already been talking about Rain, so let's go ahead and talk about Rain a little bit more. Rain Sinclair in the comics. She is known as Wolfsbane. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Played by Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones fame. In fact, she, from what I read, is this role was offered to her and only her. Like, they had nobody else planned to play this character. They immediately wanted Maisie Williams. Her character is similar to the comics. The whole religious background thing, that's straight from the comics. Her being overly religious, which makes her struggle with her mutation of being a werewolf, because it's kind of looked at as kind of demon-ish. I don't think that she has the W brand, for the witch's brand that is on her back shoulder and then later on her neck. Good grief, that one on the neck had to hurt. I ain't gonna lie. But yeah, so the character is pretty similar. She does have the ability in the comics, which I think they kind of try to do, but in the comics, she has the ability to turn kind of halfway between full wolf and being human. So kind of more of a teen wolf type aspect. And I think they just pull that off by having the moments where her eyes, turn the golden color or whatever the color they're supposed to be, and she has the heightened senses and all. But again, in the comics, she's furry and everything too when she's in that form. So I guess they decided not to go with that. But what were your thoughts on Rain, the character of Rain?
I really liked the character. She did a great job as her. I think I liked her more in the movie than I did what I was reading from that story arc. Maybe it was because...
Yeah, in the comic, she's kind of whiny.
Very, very whiny.
Yeah.
I mean, I even chuckled at some of her written dialogue in the comics. Let me go, you witch. And I'm like, what? All right. But then when I see her in New Mutants, she's kind of... I like her whole, underdog thing. This girl struggling with her own inner demons about her religious background, and even saying demons can't be in churches. It really made me felt for her, because this is not something that's really easy for this character, and I wanted to see a little bit more of her.
Yeah, like I said, again, we didn't get to really flesh these characters out. I like that, again, they really hammered in that religious aspect, the fact that she goes to confession, even though there's not a father for her to confess to. And she even gives herself what she has to do,
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to Ileana Rasputin, which we only know her last name from the data pop-up that happens on Dr. Reyes's screen. I don't think her last name is said at any other time. In the comics, her superhero name is Magic. She first appeared in Giant Size X-Men #1 in May of 1975, so she actually existed almost 10 full years before the rest of these characters, in terms of in the comics. Now, in that comic, she is only Ileana. The whole Magic aspect of her was not revealed in the comics until December of 1983, which was after New Mutants was introduced. Now, do you know anything about this character from the comic books?
Only from what I was reading from the storyline. Other than that, I don't think I have ever seen, I'm going to use her superhero name, Magic, in the X-Men series. Or maybe I have, and I guess it didn't click that she was also part of this.
So what I think I'm more asking you then is, do you know her, that she has a deeper connection to the X-Men?
Oh, no, I did not.
So again, this goes back to her last name. Her last name is Rasputin. There is another X-Men whose last name is Rasputin. His name is Peter Rasputin, a.k.a. Colossus. Illyana is Colossus's baby sister.
Really?
Yes. Which this movie, the visual they give of her kind of building that armor going down her arm, like it's kind of similar to her brother's power. Yeah. I thought that was kind of an interesting little touch there. But yeah, she is Colossus's sister, although there's no mention of that in this movie.
That's just wild. That's just so cool. Now it makes sense with the whole, maybe like, I almost want to like picture in my head why the movie was delayed even more. They wanted to make that relationship with her and Colossus, and then, somewhere down the line, she would just show up.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a reference at some point, but again, they took it out. There was what I believe I heard, there was a passing line, like just a throwaway line that kind of implied Professor X, but other than that, there was no, other than them saying, "Do you know who the X-Men are?" and them having just a conversation about who the X-Men are. I mean, that was really it. The other thing with Illyana is Lockheed, and that's from the comics. She is, even though Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat, is more connected with Lockheed in the comics, but we never saw that in the X-Men movies. Illyana also is good friends with Lockheed, but Lockheed was a puppet. Like, really? A puppet. He's supposed to be this alien demon dragon thing and real. And yes, they do make him come to life for a couple of minutes at the end, although they didn't explain that at all.
Nope.
She just goes through a portal and all of a sudden Lockheed is real. But yeah, I mean, I get that they were trying to keep it as grounded as possible, but in my opinion, just don't have Lockheed at all. Like, we don't need Lockheed. Just, if we needed something for her to hold on to and like a security blanket type thing, then just make it some random stuffed doll. Like, they didn't need to do the Lockheed reference, because to me that just I didn't like it.
Yeah, I also thought it was a little out of place when I was reading the comics and then kind of like replaying in my head. I was like, strangely enough, it feels better in the comics because Lockheed is there, he exists, he does whatever Lockheed does for that. Whereas with this, I almost felt like they were trying to make it comedic, and I'm like, that really? And then you just show him up.
Yeah, again, I didn't. I got the whole aspect of, she felt like he was protecting her and as the stuffed animal, but yeah, it just, to me, it was just one of those things of, you're ruining a beloved character of X-Men fans with Lockheed. But Anya, I always know I probably mispronounced her first name, but Anya Taylor-Joy, I think, did very well with this character.
Absolutely. She really... I feel bad saying this to the other actors, not to some mean, but when she was part of the scene, when they came around, she really, really carried it and helped guide everybody, I feel.
Yeah, she probably was the strongest actor of the group. And I mean, look, Queen's Gambit, she's great in
Split series.
And of course, I was about to say, I'm a huge fan of Split and Glass. where she plays Casey Cook. Oh, you know what? I just realized that if they actually had Professor X in the movie, Professor X is James McAvoy. So you would have that would have been interesting.
Well, quick backtrack to horror. She was in The Witch.
I've actually never seen The Witch, so I forgot about that. Yeah, I've always wanted to. So if you ever need me for that episode, just let me know.
I own the movie.
There you go. So let's move on to Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, which they do actually kind of mention that, they say it's like a cannonball, played by Charlie Heaton, who, I'm sorry, I see Stranger Things when I see him on the screen.
Same.
I couldn't separate him. Now, his origin, which caught my attention, his origin is similar, but they gave it a little bit more. They made it more traumatic. They gave him a more. It was more of a bad origin than it is in the comic books. So in the comic books, his father has already passed away. It's not some tragic, anything. He's just, his father passed away. I don't know. I can't tell you for certain whether it's from an illness or if he had a heart attack or whatnot. Again, I apologize for all that. I didn't do real in-depth research because we wanted to get recording as quickly after I watched as possible. So I'm pulling a lot of this from my own knowledge. But Cannonball, or Sam, I should say, his father was already dead. Then he goes and works in the mines. And then there's a collapse, and he and his coworkers are trapped inside the mine. And that's when his mutant powers manifest, and his little blast off is actually what rescues them.
That's interesting how they kind of turn the story around in the movie. But again, I think I like it better that way. What you just said, the rescuing it. It means
you like it better in the comic where it rescues them. Yeah,
it doesn't feel as dramatic.
Yeah, that is the thing. It's very overly dramatic. It works for what they were intending in the movie to give him this tragic background, but because the character wouldn't really be the same if his origin of using his powers was to save people first. Instead, it's his origin was he killed a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I
will say though, I did love when he blasts off in the hallway and just shreds through those smiley face guys.
Oh, that was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah. Again, I would have thought there'd be a little bit more blood involved when you just tear through some creatures, but again, they toned it down.
Yeah.
Toned it all down.
I did like how he was practicing his power, because I think he was the only one out of everyone that you could see really trying to control his mutant abilities.
Yeah, they didn't make it clear, though, too, at least I didn't catch it, that when he is blasting, and this is in the comics, when he's in his blasting cannonball mode, he is invulnerable.
That's cool.
Which is why it was odd that he has a broken arm and a black eye throughout this entire movie. Because I'm like, okay, but how did he get those? Because even if, as they make the reference when they see him trying, he crashes when he lands, he's still invulnerable when he crashes. Now, maybe if he's a little bit further up in the air and stops and then he just free falls, okay. But every time we saw him, he was crashing straight out of his cannonball blast. So he still should have been invulnerable. So I was kind of confused by that as to why the broken arm and the black eye. Although the black eye made a little bit more sense in the scene where he kind of powers up his hand and hits himself. Because I guess you imply, like, because he's not, his power currently isn't in his face, then that's how he gets the black eye. But yeah. So what did you think of his southern accent? Because the character's supposed to be from Kentucky.
As someone who has had to do southern accents for auditions and stuff like that, I thought it sounded a little too forced for the character or what he was trying to do as Cannonball, because
Yeah.
I'm like, he's trying, but I think he's trying just a little too hard.
Yeah, again, it's supposed to be a Kentucky accent, and I know that you go a little bit. It's a different level of Southern than the South Southern, because it's more of a Midwest meets Southern.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought it was on a little too thick.
The
in my
inflections
opinion.
I felt like were off.
Next, we've got Bobby DaCosta. Although I think they refer to him as Roberto throughout the movie. I don't know if they ever call him Bobby. He is Sunspot in the comics. Now, this is not the first time we've seen this character in the movies. We actually saw this character in Days of Future Past. He was one of the mutants fighting with them in the future against the Sentinels. In that movie, he's portrayed by actor Aiden Canto, but in this movie, he's played by Henry Zaga. Now, I want to get into this. We're not going to get real political, but Sunspot in the comics is Afro-Brazilian. So he's a Brazilian who is black. And his origin story deals with him being attacked by a racist during a soccer game.
Okay.
When they casted Henry Zaga, yes, Henry Zaga is Brazilian. So they still have the right nationality. They just have the wrong skin color. And you could argue that they could still go that route because he is Brazilian. That still makes him a minority with being in America. But Henry Zaga is a very light-skinned Brazilian.
Yeah, but when you started on to that, I was like, yeah, that was like really weird for a second, because I was like, wait, who's this other character? And I'm like, oh, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people were not happy with it. Of course, the filmmakers said they tried to stay true to nationalities. Blue is played by an actual Native American.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Anya Taylor-Joy is actually British. She's not Russian. And then we're going to talk about another character in a minute that they kind of went a little bad. But yeah, this one did not make people happy. I remember that when the movie came out and reading a lot of stuff about them. Of course, the articles are all talking about whitewashing the cast.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. And even Bob McLeod, or McLeod, however you pronounce his name, who was the original artist and one of the co-creators of the New Mutants, he even came out and said that he was not happy with the casting of Henry Zaga as Sunspot.
Well, yeah, it just seems off, because now when I read the comics and I see the character, I can't kind of unsee that. I was like, what happened? Did somebody try to do this, or could you just not find someone?
Yeah, and then they changed his powers. So I don't know how much you gathered from reading it in those 3 episodes. So Sunspot, when he goes full powered, he doesn't burn people with touching them. Like the whole solar energy, power that he has is sheer that it's a power source.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a weapon. Of course, he can, throw out heat blasts and all, but in terms of it's contained inside of him. Like he doesn't become what he is. The character they're doing in the movie is more like a character called Magma from the comics. But yeah, I don't know. I will say though, I did like in the pool scene. We already mentioned it earlier about it kind of having the Nightmare on Elm Street feel, that when she pushes him into the pool, it evaporates like half the water in the pool.
I did like that.
Like it's a very subtle thing. You kind of have to look in the background to see the side of the pool. But once the steam clears, you realize that half of the water has been evaporated, and that's how hot he is. So I did like that. But yeah, and I don't know how I felt of him being really a coward and just not wanting to do anything and use his powers at all, because I get that it was a character thing, but the character wasn't fleshed out enough. but to make him, kind of this arrogant, cocky, like you said, prep kid, but then make him a scaredy cat when it came to actually the superhero stuff. So I don't know.
Interesting for me because when I first watched it and we were talking about the whole coward thing, I swear I was picturing him the entire time as Diablos from Suicide Squad, because I'm like, is he really just gonna be this person? I don't want to use my powers. I hurt people. Oh, I'm sad. And that's what the
I didn't think about that connection.
Yeah, that's what I got from. I'm about to say, let me guess, he's not gonna use his powers at all until the very end. And I was like, yep, done.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah, I didn't even think about that connection. And then we have Dr. Cecilia Reyes, played by Alice Braga, in a role that part of me wondered, did anyone not say, hey, speak up. Speak up a little bit. Because it's almost as if she's whispering the entire movie.
Yeah, even when she first meets Danny and talks to her, everything, I'm like, do I turn subtitles on? And I had to, because I was like, I can't understand a word you're saying, ma'am.
Yeah. Speak up. Of course, there was a little controversy with her being cast because in the comics, Dr. Cecilia Reyes is Puerto Rican and Alice Braga is Brazilian.
There we go again.
So, So again, a little bit of controversy with that casting as well. The character of Cecilia Reyes premiered at X-Men number 65 in June of 1997. So she is not that old of a character in the run of all that is comics. Her powers are the same. She has the ability to create force fields. Other than that was it. Because in the comics, she's an X-Men. Like she's a superhero. She is not a villain
at all.
So
does it ever talk about it?
Well, so there is one aspect of her character in the comics in which she does work for Mr. Sinister, which, if you know your comics, that was what was implied in this movie.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, when she is told on the computer that she needs to terminate Danny, it then shows the Exis Corporation logo on her computer. And that, of course, is a reference to Nathaniel Essex, who is Mr. Sinister. Now, it was rumored that Mr. Sinister would then be revealed in this movie, and I guess that would be the connection with the trilogy that we talked about earlier. Of course, that didn't happen. I mean, apparently it was even rumored that John Hamm would be playing Mr. Sinister.
Ooh, that'd been cool.
But again, none of that actually happened. But yeah, heavily implied in this, her lapel pin that we then see, fall off when everything's revealed. That's the little diamond that is part of Mr. Sinister's look. It's in his forehead. It's on his chest when he's wearing kind of, the suit. And it's not the first time we've dealt with the Essex Corporation.
Nope.
So the Essex Corporation was a part of Deadpool 2. It was a delete. I think it was deleted. I don't think it was actually in it. I think I saw it as a deleted scene, but you could correct me if you remember. From Apocalypse.
Yes, it was in there. It was at the very
It was
end
in
of the
there?
film.
Yes, it was like the end credit or something where we see the suitcase, the briefcase close, and it says Essex Corporation on it. Yeah, okay. So I wasn't sure if it was in it or if it was a deleted scene. And then, of course, it was also from Logan, which I don't know if you caught this. When Danny has her little vision of the kids, that's footage from Logan.
Yeah, I caught that on my first time. I was like, oh, we're trying to tie in Logan. I like this. And then, it's just
even though
never touched on again.
Timeline-wise, though, Logan takes place years after this is supposed to be taking place. At least we assume. We don't actually get a year, I don't think, in this movie.
No, I don't think we do.
But with the fact that in Logan it's implied that no mutants have been born in the last 20 years, then we have to assume this is happening before the events of Logan. But yeah, as soon as I saw those kids, I was like, wait, is this? And then I see the one kid using his powers to like throw the guard up against the wall. And I was like, this is from Logan. I remember this footage from Logan, which came out in 2017, which if you remember was the original year this was supposed to come out.
That's crazy. It's almost like things were supposed to happen with a trilogy. I'm going to say that in quotation marks, but just, I don't know. I guess they focused on everything else but this film.
Yeah, part of me is really wondering, was Fox planning this like kind of like MCU level arc, where MCU did it with Thanos, that Fox was going to do it with Mr. Sinister, have Mr. Sinister mentioned in Apocalypse, have him mentioned in Logan, have him mentioned in this movie, Deadpool 2.
Yeah.
And then end up having the reveal of Mr. Sinister. And then you have a movie where the New Mutants, the X-Men, and Deadpool all come together to fight Mr. Sinister.
I was kind of hoping for that too, because we saw Cable, and I was like, okay, we're definitely going to get Mr. Sinister. Like, no doubt about it. And,
I'm very, very, have an Apocalypse. Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse have a connection in the comics. So, it could have finally been that Marvel was maybe finally getting the chance to really make something out of this. And it didn't happen, and will never happen because of the acquisition from Disney. So
that makes me so sad.
But let me ask you this, since you're even though this isn't a horror movie, but kind of has a little bit of aspect to it. Did Dr. Reyes give you Nurse Ratched vibes?
Oh, definitely. She did. It was crazy. It was just like, I got to follow the rules. You're going to go to solitary, and just, it was so dry. And again, not being able to really hear her, I guess, drove that more because it was so dead toned.
Yeah. She always remained calm, even when she was angry or upset, which makes it a little unnerving. Of course, Nurse Ratched is a much better character, but aside from that, the only other person I want to talk about, because it's really the only other person in the movie, and that's William Lone Star. And the only reason I want to mention William Lone Star is because as soon as he showed up on screen, I went, hey, that's Slipknot. For those of you who don't know, he was Slipknot in Suicide Squad. The one that gets his head blown off at the very beginning of the movie.
I love it, because I'm not the only one who noticed that.
No. Of course, that's not the only thing that comes into mind. Probably more famous of a role for him is he was Ben in Wind Talkers with Nicolas Cage.
I don't think I've seen that.
You never seen that one? It's a great little war movie. You should give that one a try. But yeah, Adam Beach, who played William Lone Star. Yep, also his other comic connection from the DC side, and also probably as much time on screen as he had in this movie. He played Slipknot in Suicide Squad.
He always has those short moments in films, and then he just goes off and dies somewhere.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
All right, let's get into the moving panels. We've already talked about this, but let's lay into it a little bit more. This movie is pretty much inspired directly from the Demon Bear saga, which happened in August of 1984 through 3 issues of the New Mutants, issues 18, 19, and 20. Now, the Demon Bear actually first appeared in New Mutants number 3 in May of 1983, but it was more of just a vision that Danny has, and we didn't fully see the bear until these issues. Now, you read this comic, So I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit. What were your thoughts of the storyline? I know you talked about it a little bit more, but let's kind of flesh it out a little bit more. What were your thoughts on the storyline that they presented in these 3 issues?
Well, the storyline...
And the portrayal of the Demon Bear.
Oh, that too. Well, let me start with the story before I get to the Demon Bear. I thought the story was... the pacing of it was a little off because we're focused on one thing, Ileana, everyone's like in the whole battle chamber of some kind, and then out of nowhere, again...
Well, they're in the danger room.
The danger room, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, because the comic book takes place at the school.
Yeah, it's
at Xavier School for the Gifted.
Because they mentioned the whole incident beforehand, Charles Xavier, he's out there, telling them stop, cease, don't do this. And then, we jump to this of what's happening. And this, like I said, the story didn't really do much for me because it was just so downplayed. I didn't feel like there was anything to rush. There's no stakes. Nobody was really in any danger. And then when we get to the Demon Bear...
Well, but again, you say that. And remember, I mentioned earlier the thing it was missing for the horror aspect was other characters, minor characters, for something to happen to them. In the comic, we do get that. We have the cop and the nurse.
Okay, I guess I kind of didn't add them. I think I was thinking superhero-wise.
Yeah.
But, okay, I'll take that because it actually puts together in my head a little bit more, knowing that they were in danger. But I guess I was looking at in a Marvel mass scale type thing. Like, this is going to get out. Yeah. This is going to cause cataclysmic destruction if this gets out. I guess I didn't feel that urgency as much when I was reading the little story arc.
What about the aspect of the bear when they're battling it at the end and the whole it's bringing it, and I'm going to get into the whole limbo part of this, but even though it's not said to be limbo in the comics, it bringing like this alternate dimension into our world.
I did like that. I did like seeing how the bear was doing more as it became more powerful, manifesting this untamable force of nature, of fear that could open up this, I guess, limbo dimension, we can call it, because I feel like that makes more sense than whatever they called it in the comic, because I couldn't remember specifically what they called it, but that I did like. I felt like the bear had a lot more to do in the comics. I had more focus on the bear than I kind of did with everybody else, because the bear seemed interesting. I liked the design of it in the comics. I loved how big they made it look compared to everybody else, and not just a smoky looking thing.
Huge.
Yeah, even like the close-up of the face with the arrow through the mouth.
So let me ask you this. What about the fact that in the comic books he can talk?
That threw me off a bit, not gonna lie. I thought giving the bear some kind of sentience, I liked that. I like the bear having some kind of sentience, because again, if it's controlling this other dimension, it has some kind of intelligence and not just this rampage to kill.
Now we'll get into the ending in a minute, but you saw in the comic, just like in the movie, it pretty much comes down to Ileana standing, face to face, going one-on-one with the demon bear, with the soul sword that she has. Mm-hmm. But of course, in the comic, Danny actually goes up against the bear earlier in the comic, and the bear kind of takes her out, and the rest of the story is done from Danny and the New Mutants are in the hospital, making sure that Danny's going to pull through. And then Ileana goes and faces the demon bear once the demon bear begins to attack, which clearly the demon bear can change sizes because the demon bear attacks people inside the hospital without ripping the hospital apart.
Yeah.
And in the comics, Ileana is ultimately the one who
saves the day.
Disposes of the demon bear. Yeah, she slices the demon bear in half. And then we discover, I'm going to try to get through this. We discover that the demon bear has been Danny's parents all along.
Yeah, that's where I was like, that's where I really lost all interest when that happened with that. I was hoping for just some kind of end, but when they threw that in there, I was like, that feels really, really cliche.
Yeah, it was a weird ending. They reveal that the parents were engulfed by some sort of demonic spirit that took their symbol of power for their tribe of the bear and caused them to create this evil version of it, and so they were trapped inside of it. And I just went, what? Didn't get that. So let's compare that to how this movie ends, where we more find out that the demon bear is just a manifestation of Danny's subconscious.
I will say, compared to the comic version, and I use this term lightly since you've already said it before, it felt grounded. It felt realistic. She's conquering her fear, and she's able to tame it, like they said, with the whole, like, there's two bears in your life, and it's all about which one you feed. Yeah. So I liked it in the movie more.
No, and that was a good final line for the movie, too. Yeah, I like that. Now, in the comic books, the demon bear does eventually come back. And you meant, because it triggered in my head when you mentioned tamed. The demon bear is actually tamed in the comic books, but it's tamed by Psylocke, completely different mutant, completely different X-Man.
Really?
Those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, Olivia Munn's character from Apocalypse. So, yep.
I gotta read this because I have to figure out how she controls the bear.
Yeah, I'll try to find it. I'll try to find out which issue that is so I can send it out to you.
That just blows my mind.
Let me throw this at you. Did you catch that they actually did an exact word-for-word line out of the comic in the movie?
I'm going to say no, I don't think I did.
Yeah, it's when Illyana, they're deciding to go after the demon bear, and Rain says, you can't do this. It's magic. And Illyana says, so am I.
I'll have to go back and find that panel because that's really cool.
That was in the now there's a lot more words in the panel than there was in the movie, but I did kind of like that. I was like, oh, hey, that's straight out of the comic, and it's kind of that, albeit it's that cliche superhero moment of, you can't stop him, he's magic, so am I. And then her eyes turn blue and she steps into her portal. But the movie, though, I will say, did not do as good of a job showing that the team had to learn to work together to bring down the demon bear.
Definitely. It felt like a tag
Whereas the
team.
comic did. Yeah, the comic did. The comic showed them working together to help bring down the demon bear. This one was more of, okay, Illyana, you do your thing. All right, now Cannonball, you do your thing. Sunspot, you do your thing. Rain, you do your thing, and then now Danny's going to finish it off. And that was literally how it happened.
Yeah.
It was Illyana attacks, Cannonball attacks, Sunspot attacks, Rain attacks, Danny finishes it. And it wasn't a team effort.
No.
It was like you said, it was tag team.
It really was, which I thought was a shame.
Your turn.
It really was.
My turn.
I'm out. I got thrown down to the ground. All right, you get up.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the other thing. When Illyana gets taken down, it's like she just went, huh. Like she just went, I'm not gonna even try to get back up. It was like she just was defeated.
Did her leg break?
I don't remember. I really don't. Did anything happen? I don't remember.
I just remember her having trouble getting up, and I was like, did she break her leg when she portaled out? But
maybe.
There's no really indication.
I don't know. But let's talk about Illyana a little bit more and focus on the limbo aspect. So, and again, I'm gonna admit, I was doing my research and taking notes as I'm watching this, so I may not have given it my full attention, but I gathered that limbo in this movie was created by Illyana. That it was something that she manifested as her, safe place that they kind of refer to. Because I believe she does say, it was me and Lockheed. It's where it's, what we created and all that. That's not the case in the comics. In the comics, Limbo is an actual place. It's an alternate dimension. It's a demonic dimension. And that's what I thought they were going to show when they showed her as a kid and the Smiley Men coming. I thought the Smiley Men were going to be from Limbo, because what happens in the comics is she is abducted and taken to Limbo when she was 7 in the comics.
Oh, okay.
And the reason being is because of her abilities. There was a demon, and I forgot the demon's name, but there's a demon who wanted to use her, and if he could, manipulate her so that when she, learned how to use all of her powers, she could free him from Limbo so that he could then conquer Earth.
Okay.
And if anyone says that kind of sounds familiar, I will go, yeah, because it's the same story DC has with Raven and her father.
Yeah, I was about to say, doesn't that sound very familiar?
It's pretty much the same thing. But in the comics, she is in limbo, again, kidnapped at the age of 7. She's in limbo for 10 years before she's able to escape. And so when she escapes, she's 17. However, when she escapes, no time has passed on Earth.
Oh.
So she's taken into the portal and then immediately comes out of the portal. She's just now 10 years older.
So time stops when she goes into the portal.
Or time just passes differently in that dimension.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Dimensions are weird.
Yeah, because she's still aged. She aged 10 years, but no time has passed on Earth. So, again, comics. So let's get into one other aspect. And again, I don't want to get political or anything, but this is something that was done for the movie that is not in the comic book. And that is the relationship between Rain and Danny.
Yes.
So in the comic books, they have a connection, but it's a telepathic connection, which you saw in the 3 issues that you read. Mm-hmm. They are able to communicate to each other because of their powers. They are able to communicate to each other telepathically. And like, for instance, Rain can sense when Danny is in trouble, and they have that connection. But there is no romantic relationship between them at all in the comic books. So what were your thoughts of introducing that aspect in the movie?
It felt a little off, not in a bad way, but it was just when I was reading the comics and I was like, this feels a lot more natural and relaxed. Is there some tones in there? Maybe I put them in my head after seeing the film. I'm like, okay, I could potentially see the relationship there, but I don't think that's what they were going for with these two characters. And again, I think it might have been thrown in there because of, like you said before, teenage drama. We have to have this whole drama with these teenagers. And again, it just felt really, very forced.
Yeah, I think we've talked about all that stuff. There's really no other stuff. The Smiley Men, as far as I know, there's no connection in the comics. So I don't know if they were made to have that Buffy connection with the gentleman or what. I could not. I tried to search and I could not find any connection with the Smiley Men. Again, the Demon Bear stuff was all there. We already talked about the Dr. Reyes stuff, the Essex Corporation stuff, and that's pretty much it. So that's your connections. This movie is what it was. So let's get into our final decisions. As everyone knows, we call it Bag It, Stack It, or Trade It. And I'm going to let you go first, James. What you going to do?
I'd trade it. It was fun.
Okay.
But just there wasn't that much going on with it other than maybe like one or two things. It was just not a very well told story.
Yeah. No, I agree. I for a hot second thought about saying stack it, but again, I've just watched it. So, I haven't had a lot of time to really think about it, but I am going to go to trade it. And very similar reasons. This does not work as a teen melodrama. Does not work at all. Like I've said, they do not have enough time for us to care about these characters for the melodrama aspect of it to work. That relationship between Rain and Danny just kind of happens, and I mean, I don't even care that they're a couple throughout the movie. So yeah, the whole melodrama aspect, even the slight little hint of, and this is from the comics, that Bobby and Sam become best friends, because they do in the comics. They kind of tease at that, but again, it's not fleshed out. So again, I don't care. Ileana is kind of the recluse of the group, and she doesn't start to form the relationships towards the end, but then it's just over, and again, I don't care. So that doesn't work. And then we've talked about the horror aspect. This doesn't work as a horror film. Again, we know there's only these 5 characters, and they are main characters. Without them, there would be no New Mutants. And so we know they're not in danger. We know that none of them are going to die. So that takes that aspect out. The Nightmare on Elm Street aspect, although is there, the fact that, like James said, there's no consequence. There's no result from these. I mean, the only result we ever get is Rain getting the W tattoo on her neck. That's really it. Well, I guess you could argue, them getting attacked by the smiley face guys, but even that doesn't.
Nobody was
really,
injured.
No one's injured from that. So, and again, I think it's because I think this movie doesn't work because the intention was to make a trilogy. And even though there was word of all these reshoots and all, you're looking at, even if they decided to reshoot in 2019, like I said earlier, these actors who are teenagers or 20-something-year-olds would have aged 2 years.
Yeah, very significantly.
There's a chance that and I'm sure Maisie Williams, her hair didn't look like that anymore, and then if you're all of a sudden putting somebody in a wig, or if one of them had lost weight or gained weight, I'm sure there would have been some problems there. But like I said, we heard that there were no reshoots. So you're talking about this is the same movie that he intended to make in 2017, just maybe again edited differently. So we're pretty much, this movie is an origin story for these characters, and because we get all of their origin stories for the most part. And I think the intention was we would care more about these characters in future movies. We're not going to get that. I mean, Disney acquired Fox. They put an end to all of this. Was the final movie released under the Marvel Fox universe. If Marvel does ever decide to bring X-Men and the Mutants back, it's supposed to be a complete new reboot and starting all over. I did find out this is also talking about finals. This is the last movie that Stan Lee gets credited as executive producer.
Oh wow, I didn't catch that in the credits. Huh.
Yeah, he's listed as executive producer, and this was the final movie because of his passing. That he got credited as executive producer. But yeah, it doesn't work. The movie doesn't work. Now, is it the worst X-Men movie? Because that's also in the game here, and what a lot of people have said. So I'm going to ask you before I answer that. Is this the worst X-Men movie?
No, I don't think it is, because as we were talking earlier, because you mentioned that you recorded stuff you did episodes of Last Stand and Origins. I feel like if I took Origins, New Mutants, and Last Stand, I would put New Mutants in the middle of, in this order: Last Stand, New Mutants, Origins, from not bad to worse,
top to bottom. Yeah. I'm probably right there with you. I would definitely watch this again over watching X-Men Origins Wolverine again.
Yeah, it just hasn't established where it wants to be in the X-Men universe.
Yeah. Yes. But I think I would at least rather sit down, if I had gun to my head. I know that's a horrible expression, but if I were to have to choose between do I want to watch New Mutants or do I watch X-Men Origins Wolverine, I mean, Hugh Jackman is probably one of the greatest casted comic book characters of all time, but I'd rather watch this movie.
Definitely same.
All right, James. Well, thank you again. Again, let's remind everybody about your new podcast. Tell us a little bit.
Thank
and
you.
when you drop and all that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Laramie. It's called Interview with the Horror Virgin. I'm trying to keep bi-weekly episodes, because trying to find people to interview and also give them a movie, so it takes a little bit of time, but I'm trying to keep the bi-weekly thing. I've been adding in some new stuff, intro music, thanks to Laramie's teachings and critiques to help me out a bit, so I really, really appreciate that.
But yeah, no, check it out. Again, it's new, so if you want to start from episode 1, you can start from episode 1. It shouldn't take you long to catch up and support, again, another of our fellow podcasts that we have with this little community that we have. 80s Flick Flashback Podcast, Interview with a Horror Virgin, Pop Culture Roulette, and Totally 80s Christmas, Totally Awesome Christmas, Totally Rad Christmas. I'm sorry. Totally Rad Christmas. Yeah, check them all out. And, of course, continue to check us out here on Moving Panels. Follow us on social media at Moving Panels. And for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramie Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.